What if you had instant analytics on your PDP images and a faster way to create content that performs better? That's what we're diving into in today's episode, how top brands and retailers are using analytics and automation to stay ahead across retail media and the digital shelf. It's Rapid helps teams scale smarter. They analyze image performance, they help you create optimized assets for retail media networks and the digital shelf, and they integrate directly with PIM and DAM systems for seamless execution. Brands like Pepsi, Mondelez, and Instacart use its Rapid to go beyond basic tools to uncover gaps in PDP and retail media performance by analyzing the images themselves, not just the count. Streamline banner creation across hundreds of formats for Amazon Ads, Walmart Connect, and other retail and social platforms, and launch high-performing content more than 80% faster across e-commerce and marketing channels. If you're buried in manual work or struggling to keep up, this episode and It's Rapid will show you a better way. Visit itsrapid.ai to learn more.
Welcome to Beyond the Shelf with Dave Feinlieb. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. We publish new episodes every Tuesday morning, so be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And now, here's your host, Dave Feinlieb.
Welcome back to Beyond the Shelf. My guest today is Eldar Sadikov, co-founder and CEO of Field Materials AI. Before we dive in, a quick shout out to Suzanne Fletcher from Zelda, who recommended Eldar for the show. Suzanne, thanks for the intro. Eldar is a serial entrepreneur focused on building vertical AI companies. His current startup, Field Materials, is an AI platform that automates material and equipment procurement for commercial construction. The company is already processing over 1 billion in material purchases and raised its Series A round of funding last year. His connection to construction is also personal. His parents ran a self-performing general contracting business, which helped inspire the problem Field Materials is solving today. Before Field Materials, Eldar co-founded Jetlore, an AI company focused on retail and e-commerce personalization, which was acquired by PayPal in 2018. His career sits at a fascinating intersection of AI, e-commerce infrastructure, and supply chain automation. Today, we'll talk about Eldar's entrepreneurial journey, what he learned building AI in retail and e-commerce, how those lessons apply to supply chains, and how vertical AI is reshaping industries that historically haven't been considered tech first. Eldar, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. David, excited to be here.
Great to have you here. Take us back. How'd you get your start in the space?
My journey started in AI primarily. I'm a scientist by training. I'm an engineer by training. So I'm a computer scientist. I've been programming since the age of 14. And then when I was at Stanford doing my PhD program, I was working on a lot of predictive models, statistical models, and our first company, we co-founded this company with two other co-founders, and we got incubated. We started from Stanford, and we did not think about retail. Actually, initially the idea was we have this cool technology. It was basically natural language processing technology that was reading text and was able to understand semantically salient concepts, what it means, and so on and so forth. And by accident, we ran into Groupon at the time. This was 2013. And it was, I think, just when Groupon went public. It was like a, kind of big e-commerce success story. And they came to us and they said, well, we have all these deals that are coming in from all the different merchants and, from all the different locales, different locations. And we need to understand what these deals are about, what's relevant to each consumer, what they're likely to buy. Your technology seems to be relevant. Maybe can we use the underlying natural language processing technology to figure out what each deal is is about before it comes online, so that we could, target it at the right consumer. And that's how we got into retail. So we kind of piloted this technology. They saw some great results, and then we said, hey, maybe this applies to other companies. So we went and actually signed up eBay Deals next, and then we went and signed up Live in Social at the time, and then we ended up signing up a bunch of these flash sales companies. Nobody remembers them these days. Watkins Lane. There was a lot of others, and eventually, ended up supporting travel sector, and ended up signing a bunch of large retailers like Home Depot and Williams-Sonoma and several others. But that's how I, by accident, ended up doing stuff for retail, just because the technology ended up applying to that sector. And that company took a number of years to kind of really develop, and we ended up selling that company in 2018 to PayPal. And then I was not sure that I was going to do another company, to be honest, because it took quite a bit of energy, the first one. But as I spent a couple of years at PayPal, I also spent a year at a growth stage company called Verkada. Then I realized that I really like building companies. It's like you realize that it's a skill, it's a journey, and there's a lot of, as much as it's painful sometimes, and it's extremely hard. It's one of the hardest things you can do in your life. It's rewarding and it's exhilarating. And so I realized that maybe there's another one in me, and my current partner, Victor Gain, approached me. Also, he's from Stanford. So both of my co-founders from both companies actually have been from Stanford. He approached me and said, hey, I have this idea in construction. And he said, he was an architect himself, and he has a training in civil engineering. So he went to Stanford for his PhD in civil engineering. And he said, material purchasing and the way materials are purchased in construction is very manual. It's very outdated. People, send emails, spreadsheets, phone calls, and it's not digitized. We're living in this modern age, and it's such a manual process. And I said, let's take a look at it. I mean, I'm like, my family comes from this industry, and I'm like, I spoke even to my parents. They're retired at this point. My dad no longer runs a business, and my mom has been a CFO for construction companies her whole life. And it truly, I discovered that there's a true pain in this industry around procurement, around purchasing materials. And we spent the next year kind of researching, kind of, doing a lot of the closed betas with customers, doing a lot of interviews, doing a lot of discovery, and eventually launched this product, Field Materials AI, which is now used by many different contractors across 16 different trades. We have customers across 32 U.S. states and several different countries, and processing over now 1.3, 1.4 billion in total volume of orders. So again, construction was discovered, I wouldn't say by accident, but by chance, almost, like, because I did not think about construction. I was not intentional to say, hey, I'm going to do my next company in construction. But the set of problems that I'm solving between the first company and the second company are somewhat related, because they both touch supply chain. They both touch, the process of procurement, purchasing, and it's definitely an interesting connection to this podcast, beyond the shelf, obviously.
Yeah. What a great background, a great story on kind of finding your first customers. Tell us about this company. Construction seems like you'd have a very broad customer base. How do you find your customers?
Yeah, so our primary customers now are commercial and civil contractors. So we don't serve like residential contractors that do your house or renovation projects. We serve customers that do data centers, hospitals, big office buildings, that type of stuff, schools, school campuses. And for them, they buy materials while there's Lowe's and Home Depot, which is the primary retail. They buy, most of their materials come from specialty suppliers, that mostly have, warehouses and branches all across the country. But, it's not a typical retail where you go into a store and you look at a shelf and you buy something. They still buy quite a bit from Lowe's and Home Depot. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's probably 10% or maybe 20% of their purchases are, sort of, I need something, urgently now, and they walk into Home Depot and Lowe's and they buy something. But the bulk of their purchases come from the specialty suppliers. And that process is quite clunky. Basically, the process looks as follows. And hopefully for guests of this, for listeners of this podcast, that would be interesting. They many times the foreman realizes they need something. They call the office or they text the office. Then there's usually a dedicated purchaser in the office. And then the purchaser's job now is to either call, a bunch of suppliers and say, hey, do you have those parts? Or maybe send a formal request for a quote to different suppliers and say, hey, do you have those materials? Then he gets back, a quote, a PDF document over email. He has to then go in and create a purchase order in the accounting software to say, hey, we're going to buy this material for this quantity. And those purchase orders could be as little as a few $1,000s, or it could be, millions of dollars. And then they, then they set up the PO. Then the material gets shipped to the job site or to the warehouse. The foreman needs to actually look at the delivery ticket, say, hey, yes, we got this. No, we're missing that. Maybe there's another shipment or 2 more shipments coming in the next few weeks or few days. And then you get an invoice. You have to process that invoice, pay that invoice. So there's a lot of steps in between. So like if you think about it, unlike typical retail like Lowe's and Home Depot, where you just walk in, you buy something, you pay for it right there, you pick it up, you leave. Here, there's many steps. You first, you request those items, you get a quote, you set up a purchase order, you track what has been received in multiple shipments potentially. You have to process the invoice. You have to verify that invoice is correct, matches the PO, matches the job. And what we do as a company, we build AI agents that automate a lot of the steps. Everything from, getting a quote, setting up a purchase order, reading that quote document, itemizing that purchase order, all the line items, all the quantities, all the units of measurements, processing the delivery ticket. So when delivery comes in, we read that delivery ticket, figure out which line items have been received in what quantity, and then process that as well as the processing the invoice and verifying that invoice. So we automate all the steps so that the mundane kind of, all the data entry and verification steps are fully automated. And then all the way through the payment steps eventually. So that's sort of what we do. And it's not a classical retail, but it's a huge industry. It's about $300 billion in US in materials and equipment is spent that way. And when we look at it globally, we're probably looking at 1.5 trillion, globally. So it's a massive, industry that mostly runs offline for the purposes of how it operates. And it's exciting in that regard.
This episode of Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Mondelez, Instacart, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai.
Tell us about the AI part of things. You worked in AI pre the kind of current major wave of AI technology. What was that like, and what's similar, what's different now?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I've been doing AI since late 2000s, I would say, and what I can tell you is that it transformed 180 degrees, because the way we used to do things with my first company when we're building out ML for retail sector, predicting what consumers are likely to buy, what size they are, and so on and so forth. It was a lot of classical machine learning where we would look at the data, look at a bunch of signals, whether it's the prior purchases or their clicks or their search queries or browsing patterns and things like that, and then we would try to extrapolate and predict what the next purchase they'll make, or what that size of that customer is, or and stuff like that. It was basically building the model based on historical data, evaluating that model, rolling out that model, and looking at how this model performs in practice. And you have to go and actually figure out the signal that's relevant for each model by hand, meaning that, a lot of our work as for our AI team, ML team, was figuring out the features, doing feature engineering, what's called feature engineering, which is like, okay, what signal is going to give us what signal is going to give us the predictive power? Like, okay, for example, we learned that customers many times buy the same thing over and over again. So literally, like when you look at a pattern, like, I still sometimes ask myself why this happens. But, in retail, when you look at the data, a person might buy an item and buy it again in 2 weeks. And you wonder why. And it's probably because for their friend or someone else, because they liked it so much. And that's an example of a signal. You could look at other signals like a search query and how much do you weigh that search query and so on and so forth. And now it's very different. Now when we build the AI models, you can have the modern transformer model and modern LLMs. You basically give it a very concrete instructions, and the model will figure out a lot of these things. So you say, I'm going to give you a few examples. I'm going to show you this and this and this. Learn to differentiate between those things, for example.
Yeah.
And now you have a basic model that can separate, for example, a set of documents into classes within like, you could build it within minutes, essentially. And something that used to take you, days and sometimes weeks to figure out, doing all the feature engineering, evaluate and figure out what signals and putting it in practice. So the speed at which you can develop went up tremendously. The nuances that these models can pick up are amazing because the transformer model itself, because it relies on embeddings, and ultimately it can learn patterns that are not obvious. That even me as like looking at the document may not be obvious that they tend to correlate or tend to predict something. So the fundamentally the job has changed. The types of problems you can solve has changed, and the type of engineering you do has changed. So the way we do engineering, the way so much of it is spent on. You still, having said this, there are some things that are the same, like meaning that the fundamental science of it stays the same. You got to have a evaluation set. You got to be very, very clear on what you're evaluating. You got to have a clear objective function, like what is good. And you might have training set as well, so where you might fine tune the model or show it on a few examples or show it how to do something. And so the fundamentals of that science process stays the same, but the way you do engineering and the way you do a lot of the things have changed tremendously.
Amazing. Tell us, building an AI native company, what does that mean to you? And what are some rules of the road learnings that our listeners can take away?
Well, the way I think fundamentally, this was a big realization for me. Like I had to almost do a brain switch in the past like year and a half, because so much of what we did before was in software engineering. At least I've been doing software engineering and building products, building software products for now 15 years almost, or even more. I would say that so much of what we used to do was like, you look at a problem, you look at what a design would look like, how UI would look like, and then you would design the UI, and then you would exactly build the feature to work that way, to solve the specific problem that the user has. Now, so much of it has changed because we don't always solve the problem with UI. We don't always say that, we need to create a new user interface with a bunch of toggles and a bunch of controls to, let's say, help the user decide, to what equipment piece this invoice relates to. You think about it as like, can it be solved with an agent? So like, can this problem be solved completely in the background, where an agent would look at something, make a decision, assign it, and then just ask for a human to check their work? So this way, your UI does not become just like a bunch of toggles and controls and settings, but it becomes a background process that takes some data, processes that data, and then pins the human to check their work, or pins the human for an answer. And that's what makes it AI native, that you you really have to change the mindset in which you operate. Number one. Number two, what makes it AI native in my mind is ability to customize things. So like I think that the new form of software with AI native software is that the user has to be in the driving seat, in the sense that if he comes to you tomorrow and says, "Hey, I want to customize this field, or I want I want to have an approval step right here," for example. The way we would build it before, we would say, okay, let's add another setting or control that would say, okay, if it's above this threshold, do this. If it's above that threshold, do that. Now you say, okay, well, I can write an agent for you to do that. I could say, hey, an agent now will go and route this for approval, or I could just say, hey, I'm going to empower you to write an agent. So I'm going to give you a prompt engineering UI and everything else, and you'll be able to define how you want this to work. And that's what makes it AI native. And I think that's the fundamental difference between current software and what we used to do.
How much are you seeing end users write their own prompts versus, let's say, you're doing some of that work for them and kind of getting it set up, if you will?
I think right now it's all us driving it. To be honest, I don't think the average user, especially in the more blue collar industries, I don't think we're quite there yet, where we can just put it into the hands of customers. But in our case, we do mostly, a lot of what's called forward deployed engineering, where you basically have customer success managers that basically come in and they will be able to customize certain agents to the needs of a customer. In that case, we operate that way. But I do look at some of the other products we use ourselves, and we as an IT company, as a software engineering company, we certainly operate that way, where we come in and we customize a lot of the software ourselves, where we go and do a lot of prompt engineering ourselves to do what it needs, when it comes to sales, when it comes to marketing and those types of functions.
For our listeners who are looking to do more with AI in their day-to-day work, learn more, what do you recommend? How can they try out things beyond, let's say, refining their emails or working on presentations, all of which are extremely useful? I'm doing that day in and day out now, but what are other ways you're seeing people learn about the space?
I think it's so hard to say what is the best way to learn nowadays, because we're in this interesting inflection point, almost like where it reminds me a lot of the late 90s. I was still kind of when I was growing up, I was a teenager in the late 90s, but I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I find that it was a very similar time when the web came out. And I remember the times when the web came out and people learned how to do HTML. And my brother, I remember he came from he went to college, and then he came home. I was in high school, and I was already programming at the time. And he's like, I learned how to do HTML. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And he taught me how to do HTML and JavaScript. And I was fascinated that you could just put together a website and things like that. So at the time, nobody knew how to do those things, in the 90s. And if you could learn how to do this, you felt very powerful, and you could, So I find it the same way now when we work with AI tools. Most people don't know how these things work, and there is no perfect recipe on how you do this now. What's the perfect way to learn AI? But in my mind, the key thing right now, everyone got to do the basics of hey, I have an email, I need to edit it, I'm going to throw it into AI. Or I need a basic advice on oh, I have a problem in my garden, something is not growing, let me ask AI. Everyone got this, but what the next step that everyone should push each other on is what I call AI with arms, with hands, with specific skills that it can do. So the way I'm trying to use AI myself is, especially with Claude these days, you could plug it into Slack, you could plug it into email, you could plug it into Google Drive, you could plug it into a lot of tools that you use, and then start automating a lot of the daily tasks, as well as start creating a dedicated, you may call it agent or dedicated, essentially like an agent for yourself to do specific tasks where you put all the context on specific thing you need to do. Hey, I have I have my marketing event calendar and I need to do this thing every single week. I'm going to sit down and do this. Can I create an agent that specifically will look at this and do specific things, and it will have all the context and maybe be programmed to do this at a certain hour every week to give me reminders or do something for me, or send some Slack messages? That I think is the thing that not everyone does. And I think, if my advice would be like, try to push yourself and do stuff like that. And I think you're going to be ahead of most people if you can do that.
Well, Eldar, it's a great topic. I have so many questions I could ask you, but I've got to take you to our rapid rundown, a few fast-paced questions, your quick thoughts. First off, industries you think AI will transform next?
I think financial industries and consultant industries.
Great. A mistake founders often make when building AI companies?
Start from a problem first. Problem needs to be a deep pain. And if you can solve that deep pain, and then technology comes second. Like so many times, it doesn't just apply to AI companies, but all companies start from the problem, solve it, rather than technology first.
Great advice. At the end of a busy week, how do you like to unwind?
I think my perfect Friday is sitting down with my wife, having a nice dinner, and when kids go upstairs and just play, and I can just have a quiet kind of conversation just about life with my wife. I think that's probably the best way to unwind for me.
Fantastic. Who is someone we should interview on Beyond the Shelf in the future?
I think that there are so many great retail executives that I have a lot of respect for. One person that comes to my mind, someone I have a lot of respect for, maybe Mike Amand, who used to be a EVP at Lowe's and then vice president at Home Depot. He's now not in retail, but he's a chief digital officer of Ford. But he's someone that knows a lot about retail, and I hugely respect.
We'll look him up. We'll tell him you sent us. And Field Materials AI, if our listeners want to find out more about the company, if they want to reach out to you online, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just go to fieldmaterials.ai or fieldmaterials.com and check it out. Or you can go to our LinkedIn page as well. We post frequent updates and find out more.
Fantastic. Well, another shout out to Suzanne at Zelda for introducing us. Eldar, it's been great talking with you. I learned a ton, not only about construction, but about AI, how to adopt it, and how to learn about it, which is fantastic. Wishing you the best, and thanks for joining me here on Beyond the Shelf.
Thank you, David.
That's it for this week's episode of Beyond the Shelf. If you enjoy the show, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. It really helps us grow. And feel free to share us with your colleagues so they too can hear weekly perspectives from the brightest minds in e-commerce. You can also check us out on LinkedIn, where we post clips from each episode, share Dave's takes on breaking industry news, and much more. Beyond the Shelf is a production of It's Rapid. Our host is Dave Feinlieb, and our producer is Jake Musiker. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.